It's great to be with you, even though I can't see you. I long for the days when everybody can be up on a screen so we can see hundreds of people at the same time. The technology is available, but we're not there quite yet. But today I want to talk about trusting God through difficulty. Trusting God through difficulty. And we're all familiar with Psalm 23, where David says, even though I walk through the darkest valley or the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And I'd never kind of fixated on this little phrase before, but this caught my attention. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. And even though caught my attention, and I asked myself, well, Kurt, have you had any even though moments in your life, or even though situations in your life? And I remember when our son was diagnosed with leukemia, and he almost died 5 times. It was a very darkest valley situation, and at times it was incredibly difficult to trust God, that he was guiding us and he would get us through the situation. And many times my mind, or the critical inner voice inside me, was just saying, he's going to die, you're going to lose him, look what the doctors are going to say, the odds are against him. And you really fight, like, who are you going to listen to? And I love Jesus. He said, my sheep hear my voice. And my Greek professor, I'm kind of going off the track a little bit here, but I love doing it. My Greek professor was in Palestine, and he saw a field where there's a couple hundred sheep, and this one shepherd made a little kind of a call, a little whistle, and immediately, 15 sheep from a whole crowd of sheep came out and followed him. And he said, the shepherds in those days didn't beat the sheep. They weren't behind the sheep. The sheep heard their master's voice. And I think the real battle of that even though situation was, which voice do you listen to? So when it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack, I shall not want, we have to hear that voice and get strength in that voice, because sometimes in life, those paths are really difficult. Those darkest valleys are really difficult to negotiate. So when David says, even though I walk through, in the literal Hebrew, the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. And I think he's saying this, and you can read this in 2 ways. I can read it in a very sanctimonious religious way, and I could say, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. Or I could say it like this: even though, God, even though, I don't know, God, help me, God, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. I will. So you see what's happening. It's almost like he's not just reading it, but he's speaking it out, and he's getting strength in this even though situation. And David would say that a lot. Even though an army or war break out against me, I will still be confident. Even though Goliath comes against me, I will still defeat him. Even though my son is snatched the kingdom from me and is wanting to kill me right now, as we see in Psalm 13, even then I will maintain my confidence in God. So I don't know what your even though situation is at the moment, but we all have our even though situations in life. But I think my most difficult one was with my son, who had leukemia, who almost died for 5 times. And I remember he had to get a bone marrow transplant, and his sister was a perfect match. So it was his sister, my daughter Lauren, who donated the bone marrow to him that basically saved his life. And before they did the bone marrow transplant, they had to obliterate his immune system, literally, to destabilize, take away, kill his immune system. And I remember Melanie couldn't go, my wife, because she had a cold or something, so she couldn't be around our son. But I went to the hospital with him, and they put him in this kind of radiation room. And I remember they started with his toes all the way up to his brain, his head, and they had to give radiation to every single part of his body. So basically, he had no immune system. So if it was just a common flu or a cold or a little virus or something, immediately would go into him, and he had no defense system, no soldiers, were on the ready to attack, a foreign object that would come in to harm him. So what happened is he got pneumonia, double pneumonia on both lungs. And when you have no immune system and you have no double pneumonia, you simply don't survive. So we're in the hospital with our son Kyle, Melanie and I, and of course, you have this critical inner voice that tells you one thing, and then you have another voice of God that is more difficult to tap into. But when you hear it, it gives you confidence, and you can honestly say, the Lord is my shepherd. You can honestly say that even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil because, God, you are with me. And if I didn't take that position, your mind plays tricks on you. You're not going to make it. But God gave us that ability to put not maybe all of our confidence, but a lot of our confidence in him in that even though situation. So we could say, well, even though he has no defense system, even though he has no immune system, even though he's just about to go on the iron lung, even though the doctors are not looking very happy, even though his prognosis means that he will probably die, I will still trust in you. So I don't know what your even though situation. I've had so many. I could stand up here and talk the whole day about one time we had no money, no way of paying the bills when we were first married. It was even though, and then we just prayed to God. We said, God, you're our shepherd. Take us to some greener pastures. And in that week, we had so much money given to us. So many jobs were offered to my wife. God took care of us and got us out of that even though situation. So maybe you could, I love this, what David says in Psalm 27, verse 3. He says, even though a war breaks out against me, I will still be confident. Now, look, I could say this to you. I could come across as super spiritual, and I could say to you, you know what? Even though a war break out against me, I will still be confident. And you'll say, oh, sure you will, Kurt. Like if I just was in a dark alley and I saw a guy with a chainsaw all fired up running after me, I would probably, lose my confidence right there and then. But I was thinking about the life of David and how he could say something like this. I mean, even though a war breaks out against me, I will still be confident. I was asking myself, well, how could David make such a grandiose statement like that? And I said, hold on. He could honestly say that because so many wars did break out against him. Remember, we meet him as a teenager, and we see him taking on Goliath. That took an incredible amount of confidence in God. We see him battling the Philistines, etc., etc., etc. So David was a man of war, but he learned to trust God. He learned not to fear. He learned, in fact, he was amazing at finding strength in God. I remember that one story where he finds out that some raiders have stolen all of his possessions, his wife, his children, and those of his men. And then they had to ride, I think, 3 days and 3 nights. Imagine this. After fighting a war, where a war did break out against him, he has to get on his horses or his mode of transport, and they have to ride for 3 days and 3 nights to get to where they were staying, their camp. And then he arrives, and his wife's not there, his children are not there, his possessions are not there. And then you start kind of losing control of your mind. The critical inner voice comes in and says, oh, look what they're going to do to your wife and this and that. You'll never see them again, and your children, and all of these kind of things were going on in David's mind in the life of his men. But even then, David said, and his men wanted to stone him. His men actually wanted to kill him and said, why have you got, we're giving our lives for you, and now look what happened. And David had all of this pressure on him. Then the first thing he does is he goes and he finds strength in God. You see, he faced that even though situation, But what distinguished David from the rest of his men is he was the only one that took time to find strength in God. Now, if I found my wife and my possessions and my children stolen by some criminal organization, for example, man, I would get in my car and just press down the accelerator and get to the scene of the crime as soon as possible. I would probably kind of lose it emotionally. But David, at probably one of the greatest even though moments in his entire life, when your wife and children are kidnapped by an army that has a terrible, brutal reputation, that's probably one of the biggest even though situations in David's life. But he just took time to find strength in God. God gave him the strength, and he got his wife and children back and his possessions and a lot more as well. So maybe we can substitute our name. So we can say, even though I have no money, okay, I will still be confident. Even though I'm single and I'm lonely, I will still be confident. And it's a real fight, to get through these even though. And even though situation can either make or break us. But with God, let's just go back to that psalm. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. So I want to talk about 3 ways, okay, we can get the strength, the confidence to make it through our even though situations in life, okay? And number 1 is a surprising. Sing it out loud like the blues. Now you might say, well, Kurt, what does singing have to do? I'm going through a really difficult time in my life right now because of this COVID-19, etc. Why would you talk about singing? But if you go to the Psalms, like Psalm 23 that I've just read, Psalm 27, which I've just read, you'll notice that they were set to music. You notice that David didn't speak these. Like, I can read this and I said, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. I can read it in a terrible religious voice. I can go, even though I walk through, but David sang this out. This was like probably very equivalent to the blues, where he said, even though I walk through the darkest valley, and you can just see his body kind of going in emotion. This was emotional music, kind of like flamenco music that we have in Spain. It's called deep song, and it really connects with your soul. It's almost disturbing. But I love the blues. Eric Clapton and so on, I really like. But we have this one very famous guitarist in America. His name was Muddy Waters. Very famous. Well, with a name like Muddy Waters, you have to play the blues. And he would talk about the blues as the songs we sing behind the mule, the songs that we sing behind the donkey. Because it's easy to sing songs in front of the mule, in front of the donkey, but he was talking about the plantation times when there was slavery and people were treated despicably and their masters, ruled them, and then they would be working, 12 hours a day behind the mule, plowing the fields, and that's when they sang the blues. So David, for example, in Psalm 13, he's singing the blues. So I would lie to you if I just said, I'm going to read Psalm 13 for you. You can't read Psalm 13. Psalm 13 is a song. We don't know the rhythm. We don't know if David I'm sure he had a great voice. I'm sure he was a good musician. He played the equivalent of a guitar in those days. Remember when King Saul was being troubled by evil spirits, and then he hired David before he was king to come in and just like play the guitar, the lyre for him and sing over him, and then those evil spirits would be lifted. So David was a very accomplished musician, but you have to understand that the Psalms, you could use the word, the songs were meant to be sung. And I don't know about you, but maybe you're going through a difficult time and then you just sing a song. I don't know what it is. Every morning I get up and I don't really know the words to a lot of songs, but for some reason, even though I didn't grow up with hymns, I just sing the tunes of hymns. And sometimes I don't even know what I'm talking about or singing about. Then my wife says, oh, do you know that you're singing this hymn? And I said, no, I didn't, Melanie, but it just comforts me. It does something to me when you sing. So when you're going through an even though situation, a really difficult situation, my advice as a Christian, as a pastor, as a psychiatrist's son, is sing the blues. Sing about it. Sing about what you're going through, step number one. For example, in Psalm 13, it starts out, it says, "For the director of music, a psalm of David." I love David. You know, if you go to, there's 2 psalms where David talks about his adultery. Can you imagine a pastor committing adultery and then setting it as a song to be sung? Okay? But anyway, Psalm 13 is a song, and this song begins like this. This is the lyrics. Maybe you've never heard a Christian song like this, because a lot of our Christian songs are very positive, etc., but this one is a song. And he says, "How long, Lord?" This is how the song begins. "Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" Okay? "How long must I wrestle with my thoughts day after day and have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?" And here we see this almost brutal honesty. I remember Bono was being interviewed, or maybe the other way around, by Eugene Peterson, the author of the Message version of the Bible. And Bono says, "I just long for Christians to get to the point where they can write some honestly raw lyrics." And I'm reading Psalm 13, and I see David singing a song when he was behind the mule, when he was in an even though situation that it was almost impossible to get out of it. Probably the background of this song was, imagine, you know, David's son Absalom had just slept in public with all of his wives and all his concubines and was trying to kill his father. Imagine if you were in an even though situation like that, and I'm an American, and say I was running from the government and they're after me, and my son's the president, and they're coming in Black Hawk helicopters, you know, with these high-powered machine guns and heat sensors and so on to track me down. That was more or less the situation that David was in. So he's just honest. He doesn't, he just says, he lets it out, man. He just says, "God, this is how I feel." And it was like a very kind of cathartic feeling for him. Okay, so number one, when you're in an even though situation, let it out. Don't make excuses. Don't say, "Oh, maybe God is testing me," or "Maybe this is happening," or "Maybe this is happening," or "Maybe God doesn't love me." Just let it out. Let God know how you feel. Number two, ask God to give you strength. Now, I don't know what it is. Many times when we go through an even though situation, we'll ask God to get us out of the situation, but very few of us say, "God, give me the strength. Give me the confidence." Even the Apostle Paul says, "Pray that I might have boldness." Some of these things we can't self-generate. We can't go to the airport and pick up a self-help book, you know, the read when we're on the plane or something. It doesn't work like that. But when we ask God for strength, for courage, for boldness, He will give it to us abundantly and generously. And this is what David does. In the 3rd verse of Psalm number 13, he says, "Look on me and answer, Lord my God." Like he's just poured out his heart. He's told God that, "Hey, you're not even involved in my life. I can't see you. I'm frustrated. It doesn't look like you're getting me out of this situation." And then suddenly he changes tune, but this is how he found strength in God. This is what kept him alive at Ziklag when his men wanted to stone him and said, "Everything's going wrong. There's no way out. There's no exit sign anywhere. You know, there's no lights. It's all darkness. We're going to die altogether." But David said, "No, I'm going to find strength in God." So we're learning from him. I'm learning from him. He says, "Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall." So David's saying, "Don't extract me yet from this situation, but give me the strength so I can work with you, God. We can work together to overcome this situation. He didn't say, God, just kill Goliath right now, make him disappear. No, he said, give me this confidence to take on this monster of a man right in front of me. But it's interesting, he says, give light to my eyes, which means give me courage, give me confidence, give me the ability to feel that, I can make a difference with you. And it's a wonderful Hebrew word. I don't know if you remember that story where King Saul proclaimed a war, and he told his soldiers, nobody eats until the enemy is defeated. Now, that's stupid, man. I mean, it's like saying to Manchester United, and you're having a football game, nobody eats until you win 3 games. So it didn't make sense. But Jonathan didn't know about this, and when this was going on, and he was with his arms bearer, and Jonathan saw this lovely honeycomb, probably a lot of bees. So he didn't stick his hand in it. So what Jonathan did is he had a spear, a fairly lengthy spear, and he stuck his spear into the honeycomb, okay? And then he walked away from the beehive, and he just put it to his lips and just sucked that honey, and it said it gave light to his eyes. Now, I don't know if you've experienced that. When our son was battling with cancer, when I was in a million even those situations in my life, I don't know where it came from, but suddenly I would ask God to give me that strength, and suddenly joy would hit me out of the middle of nowhere. When we were in the hospital for over a year, I learned that joy hangs out in the most mysterious, weirdest places possible. I remember experiencing the joy of the Lord when I was in an isolation room with my son, where I couldn't even go out basically for a whole week during the transplant, but yet joy is there, strength is there, confidence is there, but we have to ask for it. So he says, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. In other words, if I don't have that joy, that confidence, if I can't say, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil now, my circumstances are going to get the best of me. People are going to say, you lost. Where is your God? So number 1, you got to sing it out. You got to let it out. And number 2, you have to ask God for the strength. Because I'm going to tell you something. I was taught that as a young man, I shouldn't cry, I should be strong and show no weakness, and I don't even need any help. I can do everything by myself in life. But guess what? We do need help. Guess who strengthened? You know how God strengthened David sometime? He sent Jonathan to him. And it said that Jonathan strengthened David in the Lord. See, when we ask for strength, God might do it through somebody else. God might do it miraculously and just give you that strength right now. Why don't you ask him if you're going through an even though situation? And number 3, you become what you focus on, okay? Now, I just have a letter that a woman wrote, and she says this: I have hit an all-time low recently, and everything that I thought defined me has been stripped away. I feel like a shell with no life left in me. However, I know that I must do something. Otherwise, I could end up in a mental institute or something. My life is becoming more isolated and introverted and self-destructive by the day. I used to have some dreams and passions, but even when I think of these now, it seems like so much effort and hard work, and I hear the voices in my head telling me, you won't do it anyway. You'll start and then give up. You're a failure. You haven't got the time. You'll make excuses. You're just an inherently fat, lazy, single mother, and it's no wonder you feel like this. You deserve to feel like this. This is what the voice is. So she's in an even though situation, but she's not really. She's singing the blues. She's saying how she feels. She's writing about it. She's asking for help. That's great. But I don't see her asking God, and I just pray for this woman that she would ask God for that strength, that light in her eyes, okay? But she's not focusing on anything good. Even when she focuses on her dreams, it's too much effort because she'll have to put effort in to get to her dreams. So it's like she's just given up on life altogether. So now David has a much worse situation than this woman, okay? His son's coming after him to kill him. It's a life or death situation. This woman's situation is not life or death, but David has a genuine life or death situation, his son coming against him. But then he changes tune. because Psalm 13 is just, what, 5 or 6 verses. It's very short. And he goes from absolute depression to experiencing the goodness of God. And then, look what he focuses on. He says, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me." So he's in this terrible, even though situation, this terrible darkest valley. And what's his solution? He starts singing, kind of like Paul and Barnabas and in jail, and Peter, and they start singing, and then the chains break down. So singing and expressing your heart and being kind of verbal like that seems to be something very, very habitual in Scripture. But it's amazing, in Psalm 27, when David says, "Even though a war break out against me, I will still be confident." In the verse after that, he says, I long to behold the beauty of the Lord." So here's a guy that's in this warfare situation, and he says, like to his troops, "Hey guys, I just want to focus on the beauty of God right now." But it says that, in the Bible, that we are, I like in Proverbs 23, verse 7, it says, "As a person thinks, so he is." So really, as we think, what we choose to focus on, we become that. So if I'm focusing on the fear or what might go wrong, we become that. We lose our confidence, we lose our strength, and then that even though situation just kind of eats us up. So I just want to encourage all of us today is that even though a war breaks out against you or me, we'll still be confident. Even though we're going through the darkest valley at this current moment, we will not fear. And I pray that God will get you through this one. And like David, you can say, "God, you've delivered me from so many even those situations in the past, so I'm going to rejoice and sing and worship you right now in my current situation." And God bless you. It's been, even though I can't see you, it's been great to be with you. We've had good feedback from this program, and I pray that this has really ministered to you in a deep way, and I will see you on another occasion. Bless you. Goodbye.